Great. So, this is episode 5 now of the Inner Monologue sessions, my podcast for overthinkers. And I'm delighted to welcome along Alex Crow onto this episode. I actually met Alex in Scotland. I don't remember the date. Do you remember the date?
I want to say 2018.
Sounds about right. Uh,
Or, yeah.
one of these random trips that I wasn't planning on doing, and then something got cancelled, and I went along, and it sort of became a branch in my yoga teacher journey. So we might discuss that as we go along. But I'm sure many of you will know Alex from social media or various training events from around the world. Yeah, and her critical take on the yoga scape. And I don't mean critical as in like, you know, um, taking things down, but just peeling back the layers and kind of creating this understanding of some of the workings underneath, which I think particularly chimes with the way that my mind works and my kind of background from academia as well. So, welcome along to Alex. It's great to have you aboard.
Thrilled to be here. I'm so glad you're doing this.
That's grand. I know. So Alex is also my business coach, yoga business coach. She's helping me get over the ick of marketing and sales because it's not in my, or hasn't been in my toolbox as well. So she encourages us and lots of amazing yoga teachers around the world to lean in to their skills rather than lean into the parts that so maybe sometimes that we're often do about, the insecurities and am I doing this all right? And she does that with a great rooting in yoga philosophy in general. So really broadened my approach to yoga, which I thought was pretty broad at the beginning. It clearly was, could be always be broadened. So with this series, I'm trying to also tease out people's journeys towards yoga teaching. So I don't know, Alex, if you want to say something about how you ended up, in your initial YTT, how did that happen?
Completely arbitrarily, honestly. I worked, desk job technically. That's where that business part comes in, as I was working in graphic design, marketing operations. Um, and I was working for a wholesale showroom downtown LA, which was like contemporary clothing. So like, higher mid price point. And they did all the selling of all the clothing to the boutiques, to, the department stores, all that. And I built their showroom out, designed it, helped them with all their graphics. I also had a sales region that I was responsible for, but I was bored to death. They were lovely people, but I was so bored. And I'd worked in those kinds of fields like sales, marketing, and design for 10 years at that point. And just sitting behind a computer. And a lot of that is very solitary, except for the sales part. It's just incredibly solitary. And my brain seriously felt like it was turning to mush. And I happened to be surrounded by yoga people kind of randomly. My ex-husband's best friend was dating Catherine Budig at the time, many, many moons ago. Like, it was just, and then he was also surrounded by yoga stuff. He'd done a training at the same place I ended up at. Um, and just like kind of haphazardly, and I'd been practicing for a long time, but I was just kind of immersed in this Southern California yoga sphere. And he actually said to me, my ex's best friend said, why don't you take a teacher training? Like, you love this kind of thing. And I think you'd really enjoy it. And so I was working. I had no intention of like really becoming a teacher. I hated my job in lots of ways. So I also liked bar back then. It was brand new. This is what, 2008, I guess. Yeah, 2008. So bar was pretty new, and I was like doing that and some other Southern California fitnessy kind of things, but that wasn't really what I was practicing yoga for. It was just kind of all in the same sphere. And I was like, well, maybe I could go and learn how to teach that. I used to coach gymnastics. That would be kind of fun. And I was doing group reformer classes, and I was like, maybe I could learn how to teach that. But in the research I was doing and just kind of my area of interest, and the timing honestly worked out best for the yoga one, but I was just doing it to kind of broaden my understanding of something, deepen it potentially. and to not feel like I love learning things and I love new information. And I just didn't have any of that in that space at all. So I was like, well, maybe this will help me not feel like I'm getting dumber every day. And so I signed up, and that was 2008. And pretty much everyone knows what happened in 2008. And I got laid off before the housing collapse completely happened. But I got laid off from that job, and that was mid teacher training. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm going to make this kind of work. Maybe I'll try. And my original teacher trainer saw something in me for a few different reasons and kind of took me along with him. And I actually like did some graphic design for him and helped him. He was leaving the company he was working for and starting his own teacher training company. And so I went along with him to help him do all the posters and all this kind of graphic stuff that he was putting up in Lululemon and all these different places, and then his website and marketing materials. And then also to be able to assist him and to mentor with him. And it just kind of worked out. And I taught under him, and he gave me opportunities for years. And then I created all my own, and it just turned into what I was doing. A lot of it was because I loved it. I definitely felt like, okay, I could think I could do this. I'm terrified, but I think I could do this. I'm really interested, like I've never been in a topic. So I'm going to lean into that. And then I didn't have a choice, honestly, in certain ways. I was like, well, I can't go back. I don't want to sit doing graphic design. Everything else in the economy is kind of collapsing. I happen to be in a part of the country where yoga is very popular and also very intertwined with Hollywood and celebrity. And I don't mean that from like, I wanted to be involved in that. It was just that the economic situation didn't impact in the same way. They all still had private yoga teachers. They were all still attending classes. So the opportunities were just coming. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go sit back at a computer. I can't do that. My other opportunities are to go back to school, and I'm not a good student in a like formal academic setting. And there was no real thing as online education at that point. So that's how I ended up where I was. And I just kept doing it, honestly, over and over and over again. Just, I had to pay my rent. So I kept building things. Unfortunately, I came from a background of entrepreneurs. So I knew how to look for opportunities in a way that was pretty damn handy, I have to say. Yeah, that's how I ended up here.
Great. That's the first word I wrote down here. I'm taking notes because I am a student forever. But yeah, it was entrepreneurship. So there's like, you just said there, it just kind of worked out, which is, we talk about serendipity quite a lot. I'm always like, um, texting being like, oh, there's that thing that we mentioned and da da da. But sometimes, here's the geek bit. I have this great article that I love, and the professor who wrote it talks about luck and how much of it is circumstance and how much of it is created by your own efforts of doing. And there seems like to be some element. So, yeah, we speak about this entrepreneurship obviously through the business element, but I wonder if you could speak around some of those elements of you didn't just make it work. There was something that drives you to like go and do. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about how you could maybe discuss this kind of idea of entrepreneurship. Can you learn? Is it a bit of something you have? Yeah.
You can absolutely learn. Now, if you want to take where mine came from, I am my father's daughter 4 days. I cannot avoid it no matter how much I would want to try. And what you grow up exposed to really does inform how you interact with the world, obviously. And when I was growing up, my dad, I think he graduated from high school, but I think he might not have. I know one of them didn't, but I can't remember. And I never want to ask at this point. It doesn't really matter. He's a very dyslexic, like incredibly dyslexic, but one of the most intelligent people I know, and one of the most capable people I know. And so he didn't have a formal education, and but he was driving a 7-Up truck, like when he finished, his primary education. And he's a hustler by nature, like just finds opportunities. And so, being at a truck depot, he got plugged into the produce market, which is like the where all the produce for Toronto comes in and is distributed out to all the grocery stores. And so he started buying, like, he got some, figured out some way to get wholesale produce there, and he would sell it on the weekends on the side of the road, in the like small rural-ish town that we lived in outside of Toronto. And I'm only explaining that because that's how he worked, was he just found one way after another. So then he eventually like was selling that, and that plugged him into that. So he started his own import export business, and he was working for Dole, and then he worked for Chiquita Banana, and he worked for like all these companies. Then he went out on his own. And then we wanted to move to the States. And so he figured out a way for us to move here, and purchased a company, and had both companies running at the same time, the produce one in Canada and the bought a pool construction company in Arizona. It was that or Flight for Life, and like the helicopters, that pick up people in emergencies. And he bought the pool one because he had they'd always remodeled houses. Like that was their way of, okay, we can only afford this, but if we remodel it, it'll be great. Like it's just looking for opportunities and always building off of what you're presented and kind of leveraging, what what you think you could know, what you could be good at, what comes your way, springboarding from one thing to the next. And he, figured out how to do that and made a like very successful career out of both the produce company and the pool construction company, having like zero understanding of it, to start with. And then they moved to London, him and his now wife. And there he didn't know what he was going to do. I've never seen somebody kind of like more lost in my life than when he moved there, because he didn't have a job for a bit, and he'd never applied for a job, not since he was like in his early 20s when he was working for Dole and that sort of thing. So he had to like get a resume together, and the man does not know how to use a computer, but he figured it out and then got hired by London Pools and went from the maintenance guy at London Pools at the age of like 65 to being pretty much like the head of the entire thing and running the whole company. The owner was obviously still there, but just kind of turned over to my dad and let him do his thing. And so he set this example of like, you're never too old to start again. There's nothing you can't do, so long as, it's got to align with your skill set to a certain degree, but like, as long as you put your mind to it and you look for opportunities and you keep trying and you get back up and you learn what you can learn from what didn't work and you move forward, it'll all be fine. You'll be able to do it. So there's that kind of mindset that I think is fundamental to being an entrepreneur, to being able to see opportunity, and to keep a really like wide lens, right, of what the potential is, and then to try things. Honestly, that's so much of it, is not worrying about whether it's perfect, not worrying about whether it works out this first time, just knowing that every step you take in a certain direction builds to the next one and teaches you something. And so, if I was to look back, I don't know how you started when you were beginning to teach and the opportunities you created for yourself to be able to do, what you do. But I remember coming out of teacher training and knowing no one was going to freaking hire me because everybody in LA knew everybody and they were going to know I was new. And you make that silly resume, where you like flub the kind of things that you've done and fluff it up and make it seem like you've got experience, but they're going to know you're brand new and you're not going to lie about it. So you're just trying to create filler for a sheet of paper, essentially. And I was like, they're not going to hire me. At best, I'm going to get a sub gig. What am I going to do? I need more experience. I need to be able to fill this resume. So I had a friend who worked with me in the fashion industry, and her sister loved yoga, but they couldn't afford it. And so they were like, and they were club promoters in college. And they were like, if you teach the class, we'll do the promotion and we'll bring people and, we'll do that. And we did that for like months and months and maybe over a year, where at first we did it in a park that didn't require a permit. They did all the promo on a Facebook page and through all of their friend groups. I showed up and taught for donation, and it gave me something to put on a resume. And then there's lots of places, that think they want to have yoga classes. It's like Pilates studios that have downtime and open space, and they're like, okay, would you teach a yoga class? And like, your friends come initially, and then they stop wanting to come because they're only coming because they're your friends and they don't really care. But then the class doesn't work, but it gives you something else to put on your resumes, another opportunity to learn from. So, I know these days those things don't really work, not usually, but I never discourage people from doing them because I'm like, try it. You never know, it might work, but if it doesn't, it's going to teach you a lot. So that I think is like the big part. And what I see in people who are not steeped in that kind of growing up is they're afraid to try things. And when something doesn't work the first time or immediately, it's like, well, abandon ship because this isn't going to work. And I'm like, that's not how building something works. That's not how entrepreneurship works. You've got to be willing to take every opportunity as a learning experience that you'll springboard off of to something else. It's not a failure, it's a growth process.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that's the thing that really hit me in Sterling because, I'd always done these things and I'd done this part of life, and then there was this yoga bit of life, and then it sounds so silly. I can't believe I didn't think of it sooner, but it was that workshop. It was the initial D2R
Yeah.
experience for me before I took your D2R training. But like, why wasn't I not using that bit of my brain from this area of life over on the Yogaland? So, and the same thing happens like in the business space because you mentioned loads of things there about going through training, hustling when you're starting your classes, and then there's these things about experience. So I think I do wonder, like, there's lots of areas now in life, yoga included, where you mentioned your original mentor, who was a mentor, and then there was this sort of apprenticeship relationship. And there's lots of industries, particularly practical industries, you get joiners apprentices and hairdressers apprentices. But now, I think now when people come out of trainings, there's this gap between this bit you've been taught. And even when you come out of college, like I'm doing my PhD, but even when I come out my PhD, it's still a training. It's not like, it's
Oh
not
my
like
God,
it's
yes.
train me to be this, and everyone always asks, what are you going to do? But it's a training and it's a process. And I think I'm lucky because I enjoy the process. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily,
Of
I do like the end, but there's something
course.
about the joy of the process for me that's very invigorating. And I think like,
Right.
it's that entrepreneurial. I was steeped in entrepreneurial. Both my parents were self-employed. My granddad was self-employed. So it was quite normal for me as well. And where I live, there's lots of people who are self-employed because the opportunities, economic opportunities are sparse. But they're
Yeah,
there. But like you got to be innovative and yeah. And I
totally.
think I just wrote down their transferable skills and that there's some element of skills there. Not just knowledge about things like anatomy and posture, but there's other skills that you will have as a human being that will be
Yeah,
extremely relevant in yoga land. And I think that's been such
totally.
a great thing. That's really important. And that, yeah. And I think there's this thing about balancing experience and a need to support yourself financially and through the bills and things. So there's this dance that you've got to kind of do. Um, I don't know if you have any suggestions or thoughts around values and outcomes and things like that.
Totally. There's a couple things in there that you just said. So let me do that last one first. That this idea of like there's this need to balance your, skill level and what you've learned with essentially like supporting yourself if you're going to, be a yoga teacher that supports themselves with this particular medium. And I think there's this funny thing that it's like, okay, if I can just climb the ladder all the way to the top and know all the things, then I'll be ready to teach. But that assumes that everybody that's coming to learn from you knows a lot already, and that you've got to climb all the way to the top to make sure that everybody that interacts with you ever doesn't know as much as you. But that's not how things work. Like, it's just not. So there's like this, it's a friend of mine, Coral, who always says, like, don't serve the pie half baked. There's this need that people have to monetize things immediately. And I'm like, don't do that because you don't even know what you're talking about yet at all. Like, you're mid training. Wait a second, let it cook. But at a certain point, you know enough that there's going to be lots of people who don't know that bit of info from the angle you know it, that you can offer it to them responsibly. The only thing you need to do is to say, like, I don't know everything. My education's going to evolve just like anyone's. I'm willing to adapt and to admit when I was wrong and to do better. No problem. But you only need to know what, you only need to know more than the person who doesn't know that piece of info in order to offer it to people. So, you go back like to when you started teaching and think about what you didn't know then. And it's easy to beat your old self up and be like, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. And how could you have done that? But you knew enough at that time compared to other people. It wasn't perfect. It was probably, full of mistakes, but it's all good. It got them going. It got them thinking. It got them moving forward. And so you also talked about this kind of educational, like I had a mentor, right? And then I did pretty much like a formal apprenticeship, really, and learned how to teach really well and kept learning how to teach and invested in learning how to teach really well and invested in studying the topic that I was going to teach other people. That's a really different skill set than a business skill set. And yoga teachers have been talking about this a lot lately, kind of like in the course messaging for the business stuff, is another 200 hour, another 500 hour, another this, that, or the other will make you a better teacher. Yes, especially really good ones. Another anatomy course, another philosophy course. Absolutely. But it will not build you a successful business. And I think yoga teachers are kind of a funny breed where they think like the better I am at teaching, the more students will come in. And I'm like, that's not how you pull people into your classes. You've got to be able to message to them. You need a marketing and sales and business understanding and entrepreneurial understanding in order to pull people in. It's a totally different toolkit. And you need to invest as much time and energy in that one as you do in your teaching skill set if you want to create a successful business that supports you and supports, your teaching education will support the people you're teaching really well. But if you want it to support you and allow you to thrive, and for the students who will learn so much from you to actually come in the freaking doors and learn it, then you need that part. And it's such an afterthought in our business of like, well, you can just, kind of post the dates and times and people will show up. And I'm like, that's not how it works. That's just not how people invest in things. That's not how anybody in any other entrepreneurial realm builds a business. They know they have to speak to customers. They know they have to speak to clientele. They know they have to explain what it is they're doing, why it's of value. And I was kind of laughing yesterday. I put up a post about this one I've done a bunch of times about like, if we want people to stop thinking they're not flexible enough to do yoga, we need to talk about the pictures we post as a community of poses that require flexibility. Like that's what's causing that. They're not coming up with it on their own. And that's a marketing issue. And there was a comment on there that said, yes, love this. We need, I try to post pictures of meditation and breath work. And I said, and if you really want to push it, how about posting what yoga is actually about instead of the methodology used to teach it? How about like educating people what this is for, what it will help them with, what the background of it is, what the history of it is. Give them the actual context. It'd be like showing people a frying pan and not showing them what it does ever. It'd be like, just, you need this because it goes in the kitchen and you cook with it. It's like, but they don't know what it does or how to use it or what it'll help them with. So it's just like this funny set of things in the yoga world that doesn't get really looked at. It's true in the fitness world too. That's why, they've done, actually the fitness world's probably done better recently where they've stopped showing so much of like the 6-pack abs and started saying like, actually, this is what it'll do health-wise and mentally and in your, feelings of self and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's just this funny big gap, huh?
That's true. So we've moved on from before and after images. I also
Right.
nobody like going by the science, like you would need to then do like another after like 6 months later for it to be actually, but you don't. You do the before and then the 6 weeks and then but research, to be fair, does a little bit. They're only now extending those things. But yeah, it's the same. And I wonder then if there's something like about this entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial mindset and understanding a context. Because I think this is the thing. When I start, you said, I don't know how you started, but when I started, it was like I had this specific idea and knowledge of the context I was going into and what the gap was there. And I know we talk about this quite a lot because it bothers. I find it really difficult to find the gap online, but then I realized I don't. I just was refusing to see it.
Yes.
Going to the yoga philosophy and you're like, oh, damn, there's the gap. But anyway, it's this idea of like, where's the bit that you're going to fill? Where's the problem you're addressing? Or where's the thing that's missing in the context that you're delivering in? And I think you raised an important point there about the hybrid nature of how we teach now, because it was just on the radio this morning about how things have really altered contextually in society where we're not congregating so much in places in
Mhm.
person and we're congregating in other ways. But there is this flip-flopping to and fro, and there's this
Mhm.
element of being able to deliver hybrid events and things like that. But yeah, and then there's messaging of like showing the splits or the handstand.
Right.
I do remember because I did write a blog about this. We talk about where I didn't know that you were famous or or being on the cover of Yoga Journal magazine, and my friend was like,
God.
he's been on the cover of, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to the workshop because it's in Scotland, and I'm like, close enough for me. And then I was flicking through the Yoga Journal, and it was that image of the handstand in the middle of the glass room, and I remember
Uh-huh. Yep.
my husband going, that looks really dangerous. Like, I was just like, wow, if I did that in here, like things would be like smashed around. But I still had no idea it was you because your face is not really in the image. I just remember that being like,
I would do.
that's because I live on an island. I have no idea what the, Yogaland was.
Just give me a break. It's relevant to the tiny handful of people it's relevant to.
And it probably worked out for that workshop because it wasn't the handstand I came to learn. I came to learn
Oh,
your concepts and like you say about so there's loads of ways that we can deliver yoga. There's loads of areas we can tap into yoga, and there's loads that actually teaching online can help you tap into those skills about teaching and what you're teaching. So I don't know if you have any comments or insights.
yeah.
Yeah.
You bring up a really good point there of like this context. You were talking about how we look at like the context we're going to be teaching in. And then what we tend to, it seems, do, right, is like, okay, how am I going to fit or differentiate myself within this context? And so that was like, studio classes, group classes taught in halls or in libraries or whatever. But it's this pose centric or like, kind of the recognizable practice components within a in-person 60, 90-minute setting, right? And then all people do is kind of like jockey around in that same format. And they're like, oh, it's so saturated, so saturated. I'm like, that's saturated, sure. I mean, you could still work in it and differentiate yourself wildly if you're willing to put in the time. I'm happy to give you a million and one ideas of how you can do that. But that context is one. And that's where, to go back to the entrepreneurial mindset, goes, why there? Why only there? That is only serving a certain set of people and to a certain point. And then they're kind of left dangling. And if you think about, like, I used to travel, teach all over the world, right? And I'd go into these places and I'd be like the person bringing in the workshop for the weekend to further people's understanding. And then I'd leave and just drop the info and walk away. Now, that's why the online stuff was there, because it was not there. I was like, there's no way they can learn everything I'm offering in this 3-day setting. But if you think about how that formats, like, it's like they bring in new people every week, sometimes multiple a week if you're talking like a big chain studio, right? And it's just this disparate amount of information that's kind of like incongruent and overlapping and sometimes totally disjointed. And the students are meant to sort through that and figure out how it relates to them. And oftentimes it's like really redundant information, like over and over again. I'm always like, how many times can you do the hip opener workshop or the handstand workshop? It's like enough already. Like it's not, it's how many times do people invest in?
Yeah. Like you're like, how are we still looking at this image of a triangle post? Like, do we need
right?
I know.
Ridiculous. And then you think about like what people do context wise. What's so funny is like, it's like, okay, well, as the teacher, the context is we then, after teaching group classes, we teach workshops. Okay, Well, then everybody's like, well, what are the workshops? Well, the context workshops are hip openers, back bends, inversions, blah, blah, blah. And so then you get, the students coming and they're like, well, I went to so-and-so's hip opener workshop and so-and-so hip opener workshop. And so-and-so said XYZ about it. And this other person said WXY about it. And so which one is right? And so like, that's how they differentiate themselves rather than coming up with like what actually would serve the student base. They just tweak the information to come at it from kind of a different angle. And going online, like I've been online for a long time, but COVID did a lot of that. But that shift online, what people did was take the in-person context and just put it online. And I'm like, but there's so many gaps in this. People want to know why they're practicing what they're practicing. And yet they're told to take a 200-hour teacher training to learn that. And then in the vast majority of 200-hour teacher trainings, they never learn that part. They learn how to teach. And so they don't come out knowing what they're doing or why they're doing it from a philosophical standpoint. They come out with a methodology, again, of teaching. And so the cycle continues. And it's like there's so much opportunity to actually fill the gaps of information that will help people understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, how to customize it, how to alter it for times of their life, to move it forward, to deepen it, to repeat the parts that really do need repeating. Like the philosophy part is the fun part to repeat. How the hip works is just anatomy at the end of the day. But there's just so much more opportunity to do that online, especially because in person, I was making this joke with the other business group, the ones that are just finishing up the first course, and saying like online, people can pause you, they can rewind you, they can go back and watch you again. In person, they don't have that opportunity. They got to hope their notes were good enough to remember what the heck they thought you said, because they're only getting what they thought you said because it's so quick in that format. And you don't always have to be teaching an asana class or like posture practice. To be honest, the online like physical practices are some of the least well-attended things that exist out there. People want to learn more. They want a deeper understanding of things. They want to know how it relates to them. And this whole idea that one of the biggest reasons people go to studio, and I know you and I have talked about this a bunch, is like community. They want to connect with other people. And no, online Mark Zuckerberg is never going to be the same. You and your AI friends, okay? Coming up with AI friends. I can't take it. It's too much. I'm like, no AI friends, Mark. Mark, you made the problem. You can't clean it up. You made the problem. You don't know how to clean it up. He's like, people are disconnected. I was listening to this whole interview. It made my head want to explode.
AI, that's good. I know.
Like people are more disconnected than ever, and they don't have as many friends as they need. And I'm like, that's because of you, Mark.
I know. Oh, I know. We always like this is like one feature that we love in the workshop. We always relate things to like popular media, which is television. Have you watched Sunny? Have you seen
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Oh, so good.
Yep.
Well, that's the outcome of trying to make friends.
Totally. Totally. So like you can actually, it's not the same as in person, right? Because you're not having, it's just not, it'll never be the same, but you can create community online. You absolutely can. I mean, I would say all of you in the business course, like and in YST, honestly, in the philosophy course, the people that take it over and over, especially because it's over a year, you get to know each other and you interact with each other outside of that group and kind of meet each other one-to-one in, DM and then honestly, you've had people that you've met through the online space that you and I met in person first, but like a lot of the others you met online almost exclusively that I've seen as guests. And you can create so many opportunities, and not everybody likes teaching online. Not everybody likes teaching group classes. Not everybody likes teaching private clientele. Like not everyone's suited to teach philosophy really, really deeply. Like everybody's different.
Yeah.
But this kind of very narrow way of approaching how we teach yoga and how we transfer information, I think is just stuck in the dark ages. Like move it forward. There's so much opportunity out there. It is not saturated the way people think, not at all.
Yeah, it's so true. There's so many tools, and like we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but specializing, generalizing, zooming in, zooming out, and like it gives you an opportunity to be really responsive, a lot more responsive as well. So
Yeah.
it has tested my patience. I love to do stuff. I am a patient person, and it's like having to go back to the beginning and really think about being really intentional. And that's the yoga philosophy bit of like for me, we do. So for those of you who have not done Alex's philosophy courses, we do the sutras and we also do the Gita, and we flip-flop between them and pull separate bits out and things that cross over together. And we always talk about how, the sutras are what kind of gets thrown out there, and the bullet points of like half a niyama or whatever. And I actually came downstairs this morning. For some reason this week I have not slept well. And I was up really early because my husband was away early. And I came down and I was like, do you know what I'm going to do this morning before I go to work? It's like, is the sutras and ethics? And he was like, do you think anyone else has come downstairs this morning and been like, because he studied philosophy, and then often through the course it'll be like he'll just shout out, oh, and it'll be
That's
like
my
a
favorite.
Western philosopher, oh, that's such and such, and like there's this real depth, particularly in the Gita. There's bits of it that, but I always have to bring myself to the reminder. So the caveat is like that you can take as much or as little. I think this is the bit we always forget. Like, I don't know enough, I can't do enough, I'm not enough, I'm not embodying this enough. But actually, any amount of yoga is
I get what you
allowed
meant.
by the
Exactly.
philosophy, you know? So actually, even if you do just want to go and, I don't know, do an asana or sit down or whatever, that's,
Totally.
but and it's this, so this is the bit for me where I'm like, okay, the sutras is really heady and there's lots of stuff in there that's just not really suitable in a modern, or very difficult to achieve in a modern setting where we're all
Totally.
busy, we have families, we're doing these things, we need to run businesses, we've got bills to pay. And then you get to the Gita and it's just about doing and stepping and stumbling forward. And you're like, oh, that's me. Like everyone wants to be Patanjali, like this enlightened. I'll just sit down,
Right?
I'm enlightened. But actually, it's this messy, stumbling journey of, terror and mistakes and remembering the joy in it all. So actually,
Totally.
running your yoga business is like quite closely related to the topics that we learn in philosophy, which is,
100%.
I know, that great bit. And then tapping into those unique things, because I love those bits in the Gita. Coming from an island setting, we're very communitarian. It's good and it's bad at the same time, and we're all chucked in together, and you can't get off because there's sea all around you, which is good and bad. But it's this element of like each person's got their piece to play in the wider,
Yeah.
net of the human experience kind of thing. So why would that not apply
Totally.
in your delivering of yoga, services?
That's the whole thing is like, we're not Patanjali, right? You're not sitting on,
A deer
sitting
skin.
on the
I know,
cave, like
not
meditating for a
vegan. We're
million
gonna
years.
get that. Yeah.
And it's like everybody's Arjuna. You're just all Arjuna. We're all Arjuna, just stumbling forward, scared to get up, not knowing what to do, steadying ourselves, and then walking forward, on the path that we're meant to be walking on and already are. Um, but yeah, that part's so funny that to bring it back to like that kind of entrepreneur business slash yoga teacher, and people think they're disparate parts, right? That like, oh, the business part is antithetical to yoga. You can't, that's a gross, that's icky, that, same with social media. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be. You can actually root everything in the same set of teachings because they're all coming from like skillful action. That's why with business, it's like, okay, if you want to, I read all of you that Fiverr post the other day about, your first product is not going to make you a millionaire. And we don't talk about it even from that angle of like, what's going to make you a millionaire? What's going to make you X amount of dollars? It's how can you create a sustainable business that's going to support you well and
Yeah.
get you paid well, because yoga people are notorious for asking for no money or little money when they spend tremendous amounts of time and energy becoming great at
Right.
what they do.
Yeah.
But that whole kind of idea of like, it's not going to make you $1 million the first thing, and if you think it is, you're going to fail immediately. The 1 in 1 billion people who that happens to, it's not going to be probably you. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to use it as an experiment, right? You're going to get up, you're going to get out there, you're going to try. It's not going to work, you're going to freak yourself out, you're going to be upset, you're going to worry about it. What do? Double back, stop, run away? No, you sit down again, you go, okay, what did I learn? What could I do next? How could I take the next step? I'm not going to worry about where, and then eventually you get to like, I'm not going to worry about exactly where this is going to go in the future. I'm going to have a loose idea of where I'd like it to go, but I'm going to walk forward with small goals adapting as I go to those goals, adapting with what works and what I learn and what doesn't work and what I learn, and voila. And it all becomes something that's like incredibly ethical. It's like you can't ask for money. Of course you can ask for money. You how much money did you spend becoming a great teacher? And you think you don't deserve people to pay you for what you've learned and what you're going to offer them. Now, of course, don't rip them off. Don't give them bad product. But like, if you're going to give them what they paid for, then ask them to pay for it in a reasonable way. There's nothing wrong with supporting yourself. Aiming at money to aggrandize yourself or accumulate wealth for the sake of it, it'll build a certain kind of hell for you. It'll build a certain kind of luxury for you, but it won't build freedom. But if you want freedom, then let the thing you need in order to support yourself, which gives you a little bit of freedom, be the result of all your efforts. That's perfectly fine. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it's all rooted in that. Huh? It's like, come
True.
on, these
All
are practical tools for living.
correct. And it's like, I always joke, like I've never played the lottery because to me it would be my worst nightmare. I just know it would. If I did
Yeah, I've never
somehow
before.
stumble across it, it would be gone. I'd be like, right, that's it. It's just
They
not my,
say, right?
I need
That
something to do. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like I need,
oh, totally.
we were joking about this today because like there's us talk in the UK about this UBI or this universal basic income,
Yeah,
as things become
right.
automated, da da da. And I thought though,
It's
I would, it's just in my nature, and I do anyway, would be volunteering, or, there would be some harebrained
do something.
scheme that I would be working on,
Oh
like,
yeah,
because I need to do something. That's the entrepreneurial bit. But then, like you say, as
I'm with you.
you would be the same. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's no way. There's no way. To be honest, like that time during the pandemic when most people, not all, it was terrible in all the ways. Let me throw clear all the things to say, I understand. But there was a lot of like money that was given to people to stay home. I I was like, I understand this would be a nightmare for me long term. I cannot do this. Like I'm stagnating. I don't feel good. My brain doesn't feel good. Like I need to do something. I have to do. Then that's why I like went back to work, online and built everything out online because I had to. I was like, but I think it's that bringing things into fruition. I know we're very similar in certain ways. It's like bringing them into real life, playing with them, seeing what's possible. Like that's a slice of life to me. I hate just sitting there. Like I have to do something.
Yeah.
I have to put something out into the world,
Yeah.
you know,
I know I'd never considered myself creative, and then making all this stuff, I'm like,
totally creative.
of course I am. And then even when you're doing studies, it's like, yeah, this is a creative element of piecing bits together in that as well. So it's been quite a nice insight, and it's using that creative part, which I think is so human in ways that is like
Totally.
really exciting. I know I was in COVID here. I took on a master's as I was working, so I'd never
Yeah,
actually done more hours. And I was like, yeah, maybe didn't make the most of the downtime I could have had. But it's like, and it's,
could do.
it's not ticking off things, but it's just, having something to keep the mind engaged and just pushing the experience, like, you know, just, I don't know, there's this, like you were mentioning right at the beginning, a lot about not holding on too tight. So there will be people, I suppose, who like a plan and they do the steps and da da da. But like, there is this beauty of putting in your best effort, having a wide lens, and then being surprised, but not 100% surprised at these weird, wonderful opportunities that materialize in the process. Like, I would never have done this, started this podcast. I always thought about it, but I was doing the business
Mhm.
course, and you were mentioning there about online communities. That was it. So I remember studying this in my undergrad, and I think this kind of touches on accessible yoga. And we always talk about accessible, again, it's often from physical ailments or mental health conditions or these things that kind of preclude people from practicing yoga. But being in a peripheralized community where I am and not having access to a yoga studio, for example, and also I never had access to tertiary education until I was in my 20s, unless I wanted to move away from my home, which I didn't. So actually being online creates an accessible format. And I've kind of been experimenting a little bit with, doing meditations for folk who are hard of hearing. Could that be possible? And now with tech, like speaking about AI, there's all these things like how much closed captions and things like that have improved on social media, that there's real opportunities to lean into some of these systems and tech. And the whole world. Because to me, on a tiny
Totally.
island of 20,000 people, I didn't have access to the whole world. And suddenly the internet gave me access to a whole load of stuff that I could never have done. There's no way I could travel to a teacher training over 12 months. Well, I
No
did.
way.
I did over 8 months, but you're paying flights, you're paying overnight accommodation. So suddenly your 2K, 3K teacher training becomes 5K or 6K. And our wages are low. So there's other accessibility considerations. I think it's really good for entering, yoga teaching because your costs as well at the beginning are super low. You just need
Yeah,
your Zoom or Google Meet or, you can do it so cheap. So I think there's these
really reasonable.
accessibility things that come out of being able to deliver online or use assistive tools
Yeah.
in that way as well. Yeah. Which has been great to
I think
explore.
that's probably like my base level guiding. It was funny as you were talking, like that's why I
Mhm.
love talking to you and like all the people that I talk to on a regular basis because like it squares up my brain as much as it helps other people. And you were saying accessible, and I was like, God damn, it's not. Yeah, that's like the entire basis of everything I do. One, D2R is all about accessibility, right, from a physical standpoint. But I've taught online because it was made it accessible to people from one like longer periods of time, like I was talking about when I'd go and kind of dive bomb them with information and leave, then they could access it for longer. But also there was lots of people who I couldn't get to or who couldn't get to me at a workshop. I wasn't going to their city, they couldn't afford to travel. Fine, online it goes. But then also the philosophy part, right? Like those YST weekends, I purposefully teach those in a way that's not, you know, terribly academic, like where I'm putting up, slideshows and we're, working our way through like definitions and memorizing things. It's not presented like that. It's conversational and related to real life. And why we always do like the pop stories and everything, because it makes it real and it brings it to your day-to-day life in a way that the academic part it doesn't necessarily, or you've got to have that ability to transfer it, which not everybody like has that ability to do, which is totally fine. So that accessible point of thinking about it from all those angles is so worthwhile, and it's an entrepreneurial angle to look at it from that. Is like, how could I offer people the information that they need? And that goes to like length of course. That's why I do pop-ups instead of the full course, and like price point and like all these different things. And then you were just, when you started that bit of chat, you were just talking about the part of you that likes play and experimenting. And I am so with you. Like there's nothing that I find more fun than rolling something out and seeing what happens. Like, let's see what this does. Who knows? And it's scary sometimes. And there's all the doubt and all of the, feelings on the back end. Like anybody's human. I am too. That happens. But there's just this part of like not being precious with things and just trying stuff. Like I love trying stuff and just seeing what works. Like everybody's doing that. I don't want to do that. I want to try something new. I want to see what's possible. That's why I don't take in a lot of like other content from social media or places like that in the yoga world, because I want to see what's possible from my angle. I don't want to really just like riff off of what exists already, but like that kind of innovation, play, experimentation is where it's at. And I strongly encourage everybody to do that part. Just try things, follow them through. You've got to, you can't just try the first step and then, there's a lot of that. Like, I'm going to launch this. And then we get, 2 steps in and it's like, oh, no, pull back, sit, be afraid. I'm like, no, roll it all the way out. It may or may not be successful, but it's going to be an experiment that's definitely going to teach you something. It's like having your own private lab
Yeah.
that you're just running experiments in constantly, which that's fun.
And it's like what you said right at the beginning, and we were just discussing about, that key component of entrepreneurialism is that um transferable skill. So even if you do your launch and it doesn't work out, or you don't get as many sales as you're expecting, or none, you'll have done something that you
Yeah.
didn't do before, and that the next time you do it, it's going to be, you either have it built already, or it's going to be simple to like reinvent it. Or you think like, oh, I had this idea while I was doing that, let's pivot a little bit. So yeah, there's all
Yeah.
thing of like experimenting. And I think as well, using the online space, it just removes a lot of the risk. And I know there's problems, and we talk about this, and this is one of the main things. Um, we talk about in the group is the social media and, this love-hate relationship that we all have with social media. But I think it just kind of goes along with the territory of democratizing something that you get this. I'm not saying it's good. There's bad aspects, and could it be
Yeah,
regulated? Probably a little bit more, but there's opportunities there. It's free to use. And when you
that's the
launch
thing.
things online, it's low cost and, it doesn't really cost you much aside from your time to
That's it.
experiment with these ideas. So,
Yeah.
it is a great route to try stuff out.
Well, yeah, and I have my own love-hate relationship with social media. I've resisted it forever, but from the reason I resisted it was I didn't know how to use it because the angle people were using it from I didn't like. And I did start there, but I just was like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't share my, why do people want to see a picture of my coffee? Like, I don't get it. But then when I put my other hat on, like my marketing, design, sales entrepreneur hat on, I was like, oh, wait, I know how to use this. This is just this is a free billboard. This is literally a free billboard. Oh my God, wait, this was never free in any other business I was working for prior to this because we had to pay for advertising or we had to cold call or there was no way to just put content out to the entire world that was on that platform and to have them potentially see it, go, I want to know more about that, and then eventually maybe become paying students, paying clients, paying customers. That's pretty freaking cool. And like, we talk about it a lot, right? Like, ignore the parts that you don't like. Don't follow the people that drive you bonkers. If you can't unfollow them, just mute them. There's a fabulous mute feature that you can just, hide all of their posts and all of their stuff. But, you don't have to look at the parts that drive you bonkers. You can't, apply your yoga philosophy to it. We don't have control over the world. We're not going to stop that thing from existing as individuals. It would take a collective, significant, I don't know that it's even possible, movement to do that. So why not use it for what it's good for? Use it ethically from your angle. At least you're adding good stuff to the noise, and it's free. And like you're saying, like that whole thing, it's one of my big things I love teaching teachers is like this barrier to going online. People are so scared of it. They think they need like professional filming skills and professional lighting and the ability to like build from scratch an HTML website and all that. I'm like, you don't need any of that. I needed a chunk of that when I started doing this because they didn't have all these plug and play types of things. And like you're saying, do you need a Zoom account? You need a web page that is pretty easy to build, and one of our members is building an easy web builder that'll make it even easier for people. But like, that's it to start with. A good light, a little bit of a background that's not a mess.
Yeah.
That's it. And you can talk about experiment. Can you imagine experimenting in person, right? Because you've got to like rent a space, oftentimes like print marketing, get the place to like participate. If it's a studio, you've got to try to get them to market, and they're marketing a million other things. So the messaging is inconsistent and weird and it doesn't really work. So you end up marketing it all on your own, which you're going to do online anyway for your own stuff. So you might as well do it without having to book a place, take the risk, get people there in person. I think in-person things are fabulous. I do. I really do. I did them for years. Maybe I'll come around to them again. You never know. But there are barriers there that exist that don't have to be there. And there's these other alternatives. Like, why not? And everyone's like, well, I don't know. And I'm just going to make an online library of my public classes. I'm like, no, something else.
I know, not that. I know. I just like recorded them during COVID, so I was lucky because I had a bank there, and I thought, well, we'll just do it just in case. But it really is different
Totally.
for that. It's not the main earner in my business, shall we say? And like you're saying, like since COVID as well, I think people are much more quick to pull out of in-person things as well. So it's like, there's this ethical consideration about, do you keep the fee even if you have these refund policies? I am aware Alex is just off teaching in a minute, so we will wrap up. I won't keep you.
All good. I got time.
That's good.
Don't worry.
And it was
I've already prepped. I just got to go one to the other. I got to move the coffee table out of the way, and we could do. It's just
joy.
it's a lab.
Not having to drive,
No, I don't. That's the thing. Look, I'm going to teach people from all over the world.
Yeah.
D2R practice on standing poses. and I'm going to go right from this to that. I'm going to put my stretchy pants on, take my jeans off, move the coffee table out of the way, and voila. And I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to fight traffic. And after that, I can go hang out with all of you in Telegram for the business stuff, do some marketing for the upcoming 2 courses. And that's that, like all from my favorite orange couch.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. I know we are all invested in Alex's backdrop. And when she's moving, we're like, where's that chair gone? That's my son asked. Where's that little chair gone? So she had to send a
Oh,
picture of
he
the
should
chair.
know.
Still
He
exists.
should know now it's in the bedroom because it's holding a fan next to Anthony's side of the bed. So
I said I was going to talk to you today. I was like, can I show her my solo from Master of Puppets or something like that? I was like, no, we're recording a podcast. No, you cannot. That's good.
that's impressive though.
I know. It's just, I know. I don't mind a good rock tune. I divest here, but he's gotten into metal, and I'm like, metal does what jazz does to me. It does something horribly. I don't know. I don't know.
You don't like jazz either? I
Oh,
can't stand it.
I think
It
they're for the
makes me
people who are on. Correct. It's like,
I want to crawl out of my skin. I'm like, it doesn't make sense. And or just talked for like we just talked for an hour about experimenting and not really. And I'm just like, I can't. I need a pattern. This has no pattern.
that's the thing. That's what I thought. I don't think it's the pattern. And I think, like, for me, metal is so full. There's no space in it, and it's just too,
Yeah.
like, it's
It,
just like,
I agree. It does the same thing to me where I'm just like, this is too stimulating.
correct.
Like there's
Too much. I know we did briefly mention neurodivergence earlier on. I think this is the other thing about that entrepreneurship and how that sometimes goes hand in hand. Like I worked with
Mhm.
there's dyslexia runs in my family, and there's something very innovative that is consistent in every dyslexic person I've ever met, the way that they create around issues that maybe we're not fixed into, the tracks so much, and there's loads
Yeah,
of famous entrepreneurs in the UK as well who are dyslexic. There's something about
that's funny.
stepping out of the box. I don't know. It's just me
Yeah,
being
it makes sense. So Anthony's starting his own business, and he's wildly dyslexic as well, and like it just makes sense to his brain. And it's that thing of I don't know. I can't. I wish I had a visual for it, because I can see it in my head, but it's not like a picture of something. But it's like this big sphere of possibility, and instead of it being like a linear track, it's just this big sphere of dots of possibility, and you just pick out one, and then once we have a result and kind of understand that one dot, you bounce to the other and bounce to the other, all trying to just, move forward. And like you were saying, I think that's such an important point for people to consider of like, even if something doesn't work, let's hope it works wildly. But even if it doesn't make whatever goal you wanted it to make, financial or otherwise, you build something, you've learned that dot, you've learned that piece of info, and that is going to inherently springboard you forward somewhere else. Like there's no way it won't. So why not try it? Like,
yeah.
Why not dive in? And if people are linear people, if you're more of like a rule follower, you can do it that way. Like I definitely work with people that like more linear track, no problem. But in creating a business, you've got to work with flexibility, which is why this one we could take the circle back around to philosophy, right? Of like being good with the uncertainty, being good with change, being good with adapting. And that's why a yoga practice and a business run by yourself go really nicely together. So you can use that yoga philosophy practice to be comfortable with bouncing around in the uncertainty of running your own thing.
It's true because your brain's like, I'm doing that thing again. But then and then sometimes you alter your course and sometimes you don't. So it's like, that's the yoga bit. But then you're mindful or you're aware. You're watching the watching and the steadiness of mind and building these tools that we need to develop our own understanding. So how can people get in touch with you, Alex, about taking some of these concepts a bit further and deeper?
Totally. The easiest place to find me is on Instagram. If you're not on Instagram, you can find me on my website, but my website is definitely not where I spend the vast majority of my time. So I'm just Alexandria Crow Yoga on Instagram. You can find me there. And then I technically have 3 areas of study, and 2 of them are rolling right now. Well, YST's open back up for the fall soon, but there's D2R, the regular one, which is Deconstruct to Reconstruct, the original name. And that's the anatomy course that helps with the accessibility of your public classes. So instead of the person dying in the corner, that you keep ignoring. You can actually accommodate them in full beyond using blocks and straps. Then there's the business course that we've been talking about, which takes the D to our name and adds business to the end of it because it's deconstructing to reconstruct the business of yoga. And that has an initial course that's open right now that I do limited enrollment for. And then has an alumni program that Adele is part of that helps going forward, because God knows I have somebody that supports me in my business and it wouldn't be the same without her. So same. And then there's the YST course, the Yoga Philosophy Study course, which is yoga student training. And that is reopening like in August, probably for a September start. I definitely have the dates already done because people booked in, but September start for that one. So you can find me at any of those, but you can also just find me on Instagram, wandering around, posting about the gaps in what's out there, as we started the conversation with.
Perfect. I'll put the link to your social media underneath. And yeah, the course come thoroughly recommended. I've done YST 3 times, just about to finish my third time round because we all learn from each other and new things. So it's just like it is genuine community, yoga community, and I know that a lot of teachers feel a bit isolated, particularly now. So, and right back to what we were discussing about that loss of the mentorship. That's been really good to have this mentorship. So yeah, could they come thoroughly recommended um for me. And
Thanks.
yeah,
It is an absolute pleasure to work with you, Adele. Honestly, it is an absolute joy. And anyone that work with Adele. Adele is incredibly knowledgeable, thoughtful, and just amazing. I truly, I don't get to do podcasts with people who are, you know, it's usually like strangers, right? And you're not nearly a stranger to me, not at all. And so, yeah, you're just tops of the tops. So
thank you.
yeah, go
Appreciate
find Adele. Well, you've already found her. You're on the podcast.
it. So great. And lovely to chat to you as always.